She put a pot on she hair and gone. Them a the first one out on the dam. Basket on she head, bucket in each hand, hold up on she frock, I wanna she grandson. To the market, them a go. For the morning, the day is dawning. For cockcrow to give the villagers a warning. Rise and shine, the birds them a sing. All animal take turn as them join in the waking. Cockcrow, dagabag, donkey bray, horse and they even duck a quack. Cockcrow, dagabag, donkey bray, horse and they even duck a quack. Come and hear this sweet story that tell the people about life in the country. All day a back down, me now a come home. In a jackass yard to fetch the load. Cockle shy hand, bag over shoulder, running by his side, a Rexy and Rover. From the farm, them a come. Sun a go down, but up the river. Some washing clothes, some folks are bathing at the water. Fisherman, they catch them a bring. From a canoe boat, man, them start offloading. Aymara, Kwakwari, Gale Baka Kuma Kuma, even Lokunani. Aymara, Kwakwari, Gale Baka Kuma Kuma, even Bangameri.
Good night, even Bangameri and Lukanani and all these sort of things. We just allowed the operator to play this song because I know you all love it. Wherever you're from, whether you are all the way in Mabaruma, wherever you are, Philippi, Alnes, Linden, you know, especially those folks in Blackbush Polar as well. Lots of people out in Blackbush Polar say, hey, we appreciate, we love watching this show, and we appreciate and love you guys too. President Granger, good night. How are you, sir?
Good night. It's always good to be back on the Nancy program, and we are very glad that your viewership, you know, has been very faithful, and they are following what we're doing, and they appreciate that we're trying to build a better Guyana. We're not just rehashing the past, we're looking to the future so that our children and grandchildren could have a safe and prosperous country. So I'm glad to be back.
Absolutely, and good to have you back as well. And to all of our listeners, wherever you are, and viewers, wherever you are, welcome to Anansi Web Education. And get your mobby, get whatever it is that you're drinking. As they say in Guyana, your little tups. You know what that means, Mr. Granger, right? Your little tups.
Tups. I never heard the expression before. But if you want a glass of rum.
Your little tups, country style, country talk, your little tups, or something like that. But good night again to all of you folks. Tonight is going to be an interesting night because we want to go back to the elections talk and so forth, things that some of you might have been concerned with and wanted to get some answers to. Well, tonight is the night, so get your popcorn. We will deal with, of course, the Charandas effect and what really transpired and what happened. That's all you guys want to know. We'll talk about that and more this evening on the Anansi Web Education, and we call it the Charandas effect. And now let's go to again. To remind you guys, a Partnership for National Unities, APNU, it was established on the 15th of July, 2011, and its entry into the National Assembly in January 12th halted the decline and dangerous public security collapse caused by the People's Progressive Party civic administration and changed the way the country was governed. Exactly. That's exactly what happened. And this photograph here, someone told me that, you know, Mark, this photograph was when President Granger went into Parliament in 2012. I see you're smiling. You remember this photograph, sir?
Oh, yes, I think that was the official photograph, which is taken by the National Assembly for its record. It might be on the website. So I remember very well. I looked very young then. A lot of time has passed over the last 12 years.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thanks to that person who recommended this photograph. President Granger, let's get straight into tonight's business. And thank all of you who have already shared the link. And so the question is, Anansi Education examines the Charandas effect. Example, the challenges of managing a multi-party coalition, the support for a contrived no confidence motion by a member of the Alliance for Change, and the collapse of the coalition. Anansi Web Education will address the following questions. And as we hear from President Granger, what happened then, his views. And so we go to the first question. It is, which parties comprise the APNU AFC coalition administration?
Well, the parties, well, it's easy to list the parties, but I think in fairness to our partners, we must go back a bit. The APNU was born out of the PNCR 1G. So those of you who are familiar with the One Guyana expression must realize that it was an expression that was formulated by the PNC, and they actually went into Parliament as PNCR 1G in 2006. And so the APNU was formed on 15th July 2011, and it brought in some additional parties, that is to say, the Working People's Alliance, the National Front Alliance was already part of the PNCR 1G, and the Guyana Action Party. So as of the 15th of July, as of 2011, in fact, in preparation for the November 2011 general elections, there were 5 parties, almost like the fingers of one hand, which formed the coalition. So we were working together since 2011 without the AFC. And the AFC only, we met the AFC in Parliament in 2012, as you know, because of an agreement between the APNU and AFC. Although AFC was reluctant to come into a binding coalition, the Speaker of the National Assembly was actually AFC, and of course, both parties had to vote together to elect the Speaker, to the great disappointment of the PPP and the people and the person who wanted to become Speaker. So as a start, APNU was able to get to combine its vote with the AFC to have a Speaker in the National Assembly, because we realized what happened in the previous years under the PPP. And so that was actually the first move by APNU with AFC to have a Speaker in the Parliament, who was at least fair compared with what happened before. So as of the Cummingburg Accord, APNU and AFC came together only in 2015. So between 2012 and 2015, we were operating separately. Although there was a one-seat majority in the National Assembly, we weren't part of a coalition, and that had its own issues. But the 6 parties which finally comprised the coalition were the 5 original APNU members plus AFC. So we ended up as a 6-party coalition. The first time in the history of Guyana, we've had a 6-party coalition to start with, and for that party to actually go to the polls together on a single slate, a single ticket, and win the presidency. So we really created a tremendous change in this country's ability to bring people from different parts of the country, different parties in the country, to work for a common good. So that was marvelous. That was a marvelous event. So that's
Marvelous
how we
event indeed,
to go into the
yeah,
government.
and some people, because look around the world, coalition governments do not last long. And what is unique is that six parties formed that coalition in Guyana. And one might be wondering, how on earth was it able to last so long? 5 years, 5 years of a coalition comprising six parties. All right, interesting. Let's move to our second question. How did the APNU AFC coalition change Guyana's political culture? I know in the beginning we spoke about the caption of the for 20 something years, decline in dangerous public security, collapse caused by the PPPC, wrongfully incarcerated, trumped up charges, money laundering, drugs were sent out of the country in tons upon tons. People's violated at every level. Mothers were afraid of their boy, especially boy child, going out there, or their husbands or their brothers, and in some cases their sisters or their wives, and so forth, all under the PPPC regime, corruption upon corruption. And so this question is very important. How did the APNU AFC coalition change Guyana's political culture?
This is an important question because many people who were around at that time were quite aware of how unsafe it was. We just come out of the troubles, in which scores of people were killed by phantom squads, drug gangs, and life was very uncertain. Piracy was rampant, especially off of the coast of Region 6. The dropout rate for students was very high. People don't seem to remember how bad things were during the 23 years of the PPP between 1992 and 2015. And of course, migration was rampant. A lot of people had to get out of the country just to stay alive. And we came in with a policy, and admittedly, and there's no apology for this, it was essentially a social policy to look after people and because people are the ones who live in the country and who develop the country. You can't develop a country by, high-rise buildings, and you develop a country with people, and unless people are happy, you wouldn't get change. You wouldn't bring about change. And we paid attention to people. And the very first year of our government, we established a department responsible for social cohesion. Again, something that should not be ignored, because I think at present, Guyana is very deeply divided, socially divided. And just sending out slogans about one Guyana wouldn't solve the problem. Giving sermons to the police force wouldn't solve the problem of safety. And we paid attention to the safety of our people. One, we made sure that a lot of children could go to school, boats, bicycles, buses, and breakfast meals. We paid attention to the employment of young people. We re-established the Youth Corps, which of course the PPP has abolished. And this Youth Corps was to train young people, and people came from all over the country, hinterland and coastland, in the Guyana Youth Corps with a base at Kuro. We paid attention to empowerment, making sure that within 10 months, not 10 years, within 10 months, we were able to hold local government elections, which the PPP couldn't hold for 20 years. And this gave people the power to run their own communities, their own neighborhoods. It's not a matter of winning or losing. Certainly APNU didn't win many of the NDCs, but the PPP had a terrible reputation of uprooting elected NDCs and implanting interim management committees of people who the PPP wanted. So they really contradicted all the democratic principles for local government. In addition to that, we created 4 tongues at Bartica, Mabaruma, Madia, and Lethem. So for the first time, the huge hinterland now had now were being run by town councils with elected representatives. And this is something the PPP failed to do. So you can now go to Bartica, Mabaruma, Madia, and Lethem and see elected town councils, and you can see the transformation that is taking place in those communities. Once you empower the people, you don't have to sit down in 4th Street, Kingston, and give orders. Empower the local people. And this is what we do through empowerment, through local government elections. And we ran local government election twice within that 5-year period. We believed in equality between the coastland and hinterland. And those of us who've traveled, west of the Essequibo, as they call it, the west of Port Island, you know that the quality of life was different, that many of the people living in the hinterland did not have the same opportunities. They had to travel greater distances to get health care, to get education, even things like collecting their old age pensions or NIS benefits. Life was difficult. And we tried to remove some of the impediments to living in the hinterland and make Guyana a more equal place for everybody. And most of all, we made Guyana safe again. I do not think you can safely say or correctly say that during our period, piracy continued to be rampant. In fact, piracy is virtually eradicated. We would conduct aviation patrols along the coast. And in fact, the pirates migrated to Suriname, those who were involved in piracy. We established the National Intelligence Security Agency. We established the National Anti-Narcotics Agency. And we tried to bring a halt to people bringing cocaine in aircraft into this country. And as soon as APNU left office, soon after it left office, the National Anti-Narcotics Agency was abolished. Next thing you know, drugs from Guyana turning up in Antwerp and Rotterdam. You started to see these semi-submersible boats carrying cocaine all over again. So we made Guyana safe. We put our children back in schools. We empowered our communities. And we gave young people an opportunity to be fully employed through a variety of programs, not only the Youth Corps, but there was also the SLED, there's also the HEYS. And I would say that we changed the political culture. We put people first. We put people first and ensured that once the people were satisfied, and people were satisfied. The public servants, we had a situation in which sweeper cleaners were getting $28,000 a month. And we changed it. Next thing you know, they were getting $62,000. It's not much, but it's what we could have afforded. We did not have access to petroleum revenues, but we made life better for nurses, for teachers, for public servants, for soldiers, for pensioners, and for poor people. So it was a policy which put society first, because we were convinced that once society was satisfied that the government was doing its best, that development would follow. This is not a chance, this is not an occasion for avoiding in local government election because we feel we could lose. Well, technically, you can say APNU did not win, but the people won. Because the people now have town councils, the people now have neighborhood democratic councils, and the people have say in local government. We put villages, we declared National Day of Villages, and we celebrated production of crops in villages. And you can see that has started to yield results. We created what is called the RSCE, the Regional Agricultural and Commercial Exhibition, and people coming out, people of all ethnicities, people came out, businessmen, farmers, to show their produce in all of our regions. And I think there was an upsurge in pride. Anyone who ever visited our Independence Anniversary celebration at Durban Park, 2016, that 50th anniversary of independence, in 2016, 2017, you could feel the pride in being Guyanese again when people saw that flag go up. You can see the amount of cell phones around Durban Park. And it was a shame to move the most important national celebration to a street corner at the corner of Young and High Street. And people couldn't see it. People couldn't feel that spirit of being Guyanese. I think we lost something. So how did we change Guyanese's political culture? By making people proud of being Guyanese, by making people proud of their villages and their communities, by making people proud of their tongues, by making people satisfied with being treated fairly. That is how we change the political culture of this country.
And of course, your government did a great job in changing that culture, a culture away from political fears, assassinations, political victimizations, you name it, discrimination at every level under the PPP regime. And many folks are thankful for the 5 years, as much as there were rough times during the 5 years, not necessarily for the people of Guyana, but to navigate that coalition, and especially with the Charandas outcome. This takes us to the next question, and this question has to do with the impact of the Charandas decision, the impact, and what was that impact of the Charandas effect on the APNU AFC coalition?
Well, frankly and simply, it brought the coalition down. But we need to examine this Charandas effect because it was not an isolated case. In fact, the actual vote was isolated. It took place in a split second. But it represented a culmination of efforts within the coalition to reduce the authority of the coalition. Bear in mind that many people did not have parliamentary experience or certainly ministerial experience, and maybe some people were unnecessarily selfish. But what I would say is that, admittedly, the Covington Accord was badly flawed. I think the AFC decided to employ a negotiator who was a foreigner, and whom I don't even know if he ever read the Constitution of Guyana, but he was able to make demands for certain provisions in the accord which were unconstitutional. And I think this gave some members of the APNU an exaggerated sense of power, that they felt that they were bigger than the Constitution or bigger than the coalition. And I think that notion was very harmful. In addition to that, and I come back to the constitutional principle, Charandas was a dual citizen. And dual citizenship was not allowed for persons to be members of the National Assembly. It was unlawful. In fact, people could be imprisoned for being dual citizens. And he should never have been there in the first place. Charandas should never have been an MP in the first place. And it meant that there was not due diligence in nominating or selecting people for membership of the National Assembly. This is in part the result of there not being constituencies. Some people just want to get on the list. They don't represent anybody. They just hold press conferences, or they just get on the list, and they feel that political office is a matter of entitlement. Now, in every jurisdiction in the world, the National Assembly, is representative of people, of constituencies. And in Guyana, we find that because of the PR system, or because of abuse of the PR system, some people get into National Assembly without representing constituencies. And this is it's worse than an anomaly. Some people actually refuse to campaign. Some people refuse to meet their constituents because they have no constituents, you know. So they don't really represent anybody. And it meant that this Charandas effect was very harmful, the, to the coalition as a whole. In addition to that, they didn't believe in any common policy. They just believed in getting into parliament so they can get parliamentary allowances. They did not share the view that we should work for the people because the people didn't put them there in the first place. So it was the whole idea of Charandas was a perversion of anything that we could refer to as democracy. And sometimes there were problems of communication. People felt that they could just criticize policies of the coalition, even after those policies had been discussed and agreed within the cabinet. A simple thing like the legislation about marijuana. This is a matter that came to cabinet. There are some countries in the world where people are executed for being in possession or for trafficking in 1 kilo of marijuana. Singapore is such a country. Everybody proud, oh, Singapore is such a great country. But people are executed for being in possession of 1 kilo or even less of marijuana. And yet we have people who discuss this in cabinet. And we were presented with reports. And unfortunately, we saw a situation in which certain people in the AFC actually circulated emails stating that members should vote against this is even before Charandas, members should vote against the coalition budget if we did not legalize marijuana. After discussions, after examination of issues, we still have this grumbling and murmuring. And this talk is what perhaps gave Charandas the impression that he could get away with it, because this was the attitude of some members of the AFC, that it's okay to, he wasn't responsible to any constituency. He's responsible to himself. And if you have that type of thinking in a coalition, it will collapse. You need to understand something called collective responsibility. And once a decision is taken by the cabinet takes that position to the National Assembly. And people must abide by what is decided. It is not a matter of compulsion. If you don't agree, leave. But don't bring down the whole government. And this is part of this Charandas effect. That it's just a question of selfishness. It's just a question of he alone matters. The vote of 200,000 people don't matter. He matters. So I would say that is how it answer your question. It was undermined by people who felt that we were doing too much for the people, and in particular, the PPP felt threatened because here was a successful multi-party coalition. They were the ones who believed in winner takes all. They refused to go into any coalition. They refused to sit down with civil society. They refused to share power. And we were the ones who were saying, winner does not take all. We were saying we were prepared to sit down and discuss issues with all of the people's representatives. So we know very well that the Guyana Action Party spoke for a certain group of people. We know that the PNC spoke for a certain group of people. We know that the AFC spoke for a certain group of people. But we must bear in mind that the representative principle was paramount. And when the PPP saw the success of APNU in running a multi-party government, which people had a voice, people from different parties had a voice, they felt that we should not be allowed to succeed. So what has happened now, we've reverted to the old winner takes all system, and the PPP just shut everybody out. It's their way or no way. And that is the effect that I think Charandas caused. It brought down the first and only multi-party administration this country ever had. And it will make it difficult for any future combination to trust some of its constituents. And I think that is the greatest damage that the Charandas has done, not only to his own party, but to the entire country. That the one attempt to create a forum, to create a platform where people of all interests, civil society, because although we speak of the 5 parties in APNU, there were other partners, there were other civil partners who came along with us, although they were not represented. But let me point out that when the APNU got into office, well, we didn't get into office. After the elections of 2011, every party was represented. National Front Alliance had a seat, GAP had a seat, PNC had a seat, WPA had a seat. So all 5 parties, Justice for All, had a seat. So all of these persons, when we went into government in 2015, all of them, each one of them, each party in the partnership shared. There was power sharing. GAP was there, NFA was there, WPA was there, PNC was there, Justice for All was there. So it is not a question of domination. It's a question of the constituents of those parties having a sense of belonging. Things would have gotten better. Of course, many people didn't have experience, but we were fair and we made sure that there was better representation. And I would say that because of our success, the PPP set out to undermine the coalition. Everything that we tried to put forward, even social cohesion. And as soon as they got into power, they just dismantled everything that was good about it. Public Service Training College dismantled. National Anti-Narcotics Agency dismantled. Department of Citizenship dismantled. It was, if it wasn't so serious, it would be comical the way the PPP tried to change everything that was good about the coalition administration. Our flag raising ceremony, Independence Night at the Durban Park, was just, Durban Park is now dumped. They prefer to have a national event. The corner Young Street corner. How many people can see it? How many people can see your prime national celebration at the corner of Young Street and High Street corner? That was the contempt that the PPP had for the people of this country. And now all of that is not a dream, it was not a nightmare. It is something that the children of this country must continue to aspire to. That we are one nation, and one day we will restore that pride that the APNU kindled in this country. We kindled it. PPP is trying to snuff it out, but they wouldn't succeed.
Sorry about that. Certainly they wouldn't succeed at all. And those of you who are now joining us, good night and welcome to Anansi Web Education. And we're talking about the Charandas effect and what it had on the coalition government and the good things, the many good things under the coalition government headed by President David Arthur Granger to correct all the wrongs done by the PPPC for the past 20 years prior to the 2015 elections. And of course, the APNU AFC got into office. They had a lot to clean up, lots and lots of things to clean up. President Granger, you did mention that apart from the Charandas, there was a threat to by one of the partners, and that's the AFC, to vote against the budget because the coalition didn't make a decision to legalize marijuana. There was a threat by the AFC to vote against the budget, against their own partners, against their own. They were part of this government and threatened to vote against the budget because of marijuana. I mean, that's
Yes.
news. It's interesting.
It's not news. It's
How did
in the
you feel about
newspaper. It's in the newspapers. And if you Google, you can see the article. An email was sent advising MPs to vote against the budget. This is before Charandas. So that's not news at all. It happened 6 years
to
ago.
some it might be news to vote, and it's, I mean, it's interesting running a coalition with threats from parties that's supposed to be in the interest of the people, because one party in a coalition doesn't get its way, then hey, we're going to vote against the budget, or we're going to bring the entire government down. We saw what happened with the Charandas and the Charandas effect, and the selfishness. It had nothing to do with caring about people. It's selfishness,
And you
pure
must bear in mind,
selfishness.
if I could interject, just days before, I think 10 days before that vote, Charandas gave a beautiful speech in support of the budget in 2018. How much the government, the coalition had done for East Berbice. And despite the rationalization or the restructuring of the sugar industry, many people had used their payments to go into private enterprise and open businesses and so on. You should read the speech of Charandas 10 days before this vote. You would never believe that this man had in mind to bring down the very government that had done so much for the East Berbice quarantine region, region number 6. So you can see the level of deception.
And one of the things might be going through, and people have asked the AFC leadership about this, whether they knew at the time you had the National Security Minister of National Security, the leader of the AFC, Ramjatan, was there. How did they allow the evidence? Because obviously there were people who knew what Charandas was up to. Charandas denied it, of course. But what were some of the information you got prior to this vote about Charandas?
Well, as president, I got no such information. So I cannot say whether people in the AFC got information. Afterwards, you hear whisperings and murmurings, but you don't want to put your faith in that. But afterwards, I spoke to high-level people in the AFC who said they had got word that Charandas would betray the coalition. But it's right now the question of them say he say, and I don't want to go there. But I feel that the evidence that I have suggests that there were people in the AFC who knew Charandas was the weak link that would be snapped. And when you look at the seating arrangements in the National Assembly, you see people there who don't normally turn up to debates, who are responsible for whisking Charandas out of the parliament and seeing him all the way to the airport and off the calendar. So people, it was a setup. And whether anybody in the AFC knew, I cannot say, but I think there were certainly some suspicions.
Some suspicion, indeed. Now let's go to the final question. Some suspicion, indeed. The final question for tonight is, why was Guyana's most successful undermined? Why? Who's sleeping? Why was it undermined?
There are several reasons. For one, it was not in the interest of the PPP to allow it to succeed, because it would have meant a defeat for their style of politics, their winner-takes-all style. And people would say, no, we don't believe that you should run this alone. We believe you should have partners, because the partners would have a moderating effect on your behavior. Another factor, of course, was petroleum. Quite frankly, when APNU got into office, we were not aware of the size, although the PPP was aware of the size of the petroleum deposits or potential. And admittedly, APNU was not fully prepared. We didn't have personnel, we didn't have the trained manpower, we didn't have the organization structure to manage that industry. And when the actual potential was revealed, I think the PPP became more determined that nothing should prevent it from going back into power. So this is why, even though it was the APNU which launched the local government elections, they used the local government elections of 2018 as a barometer to measure the popularity of APNU. And of course, they used their own inside knowledge to know that overturning the coalition, which only had a one-seat majority, was a possibility. And this gave it an opportunity to put their hands in petroleum. Don't forget that in December 2018, same December 2018, I declared National Petroleum Day. I declared that Guyana had become a petroleum state. And, this was dizzying to the PPP. And they felt that they had to get their hands on petroleum. So the coalition wasn't to be allowed to succeed or to remain in office or to return to office. So it might not have been the original intention. Maybe Charandas didn't even think about that. But this was the effect, to put this huge bounty belonging to the Guyanese people for generations to come into the hands of the PPP, to deliver petroleum to the PPP. That's the biggest, well, not the biggest, that is one effect of the Charandas. That's one element of the Charandas effect. The other element, as I said before, is that, it has I hope not destroyed, but seriously damaged the prospect of coalition government. And I would not agree with the comment that you made a little earlier. Coalition governments succeed when you go to several European countries like Italy or Germany. I remember while I was in office, Angela Merkel, I think her party had got 44% and was forced into coalition, and they were drinking champagne, celebrating that they would become the major partner in a coalition. So coalitions are normal. It's not abnormal. Coalitions are normal. But these are grown-ups. These are not people who try to criticize their partners. These are people who try to make the system work. But here we had a lot of immature behavior, a lot of infantile behavior within some parties refusing to go out and campaign, parties refusing to share the common objectives, even though these things are documented. We see parties just behaving as if they're reckless. They could do what they like, regardless of the consequences. And that's been very damaging. And after August 2020, two parties walked away. Two parties which did not campaign walked away. During the coalition, I repeatedly asked parties to give us copies of their constitution, to give us copies of their membership, to give us copies of the program for campaigning, to take us to their constituencies. But some of them were just armchair, Bobby's chair parties. They were not prepared to do the things which were asked. I never accused any party of being a cardboard party. What I did say, no party in the coalition should be a cardboard party. What I did say, and don't forget, I did launch the 2020 campaign in February 2019, a full year before the coalition, before the elections. I launched the 2020 campaign in February 2019, and the elections were held in March 2020. So my recommendation was for parties to go out into their constituencies. And any talk about calling people cardboard, I did not call any party in the APNU cardboard party. What I did say is that you must go to a country, identify your constituency, and bring in 7,000 votes. That's what they said. And you can go back to the record. What I said, what I did say, if those, or what I would say again, is if those parties had brought in the constituencies, the results of the elections would have been different. But some parties just didn't campaign, and they must accept the blame for that defeat. So I would say it was undermined. Obviously, there were external forces. It was also undermined by the conduct of members of the partnership as well.
All right, there goes a final question there. And today we dealt specifically with the Charandas effect on the coalition that brought the coalition down, brought a good thing that was introduced to Guyana in 2015, a coalition with about 5 to 6 parties, and working to repair, or ought to have been working to repair, the damages done by the PPPC regime. We're seeing lots of those damages again over the past 4 years. President Granger, we thank you so much for your time spent, almost an hour, 50 minutes, right here on 107.1 FM, program, Anansi Web Education. We have lots more to discuss on this issue, but of course, on another occasion. President Granger, thank you so much for your time. And again, thank you so much for what you did during your presidency under the coalition. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, and good night to your viewers.
Have a good night, guys. We'll see you back, same place, same time, right here on 107.1 FM. So long.
Listen to this sweet story that tell the people about life in the country. Them children glad when the weekend come. Out in the yard, them all gather round. Some a play catcher, some making house from straw. You who come later, a grandma or grandpa, all a sit down just a wait. Moonlight.